We call him El Presidente. My dad, Dave Francoeur.
Thank you.
Thanks, old man. Got hit with 96, 97 right in the face and just knocked me out cold. There was blood everywhere.
I walked into the hospital and I said, oh my gosh.
How do you stay balanced and giving as much attention to your other two kids as you are to the one who's maybe the best athlete?
His first word was ball. Not mom, not dad, it was ball.
They did such a good job of treating my brother, my sister, and me the exact same when it came to it.
Did they all, drive themselves growing up, or were there any times when you had to push?
We signed up to play a sport. If you didn't have a lot of success with it or whatever, and I don't want to go to practice, I don't want to, you're going to do that.
Did you guys have any non-negotiables as a family?
There were two non-negotiable weeks. One's playing this sport, one's playing that sport, one's playing this and that. We're going this week. His first varsity sport was basketball.
Till I missed a three in the corner and the coach yanked me after. Before we get to the podcast, if you have middle school or high school kids that play sports and you don't want to fundraise like me, we got you covered. My buddy Chris Carneal owns Booster. Chris?
We help schools and sports teams raise funds in a super fun and engaging way. In fact, the last 22 years, we've raised $750 million, and we can't wait to help you. Choose booster.com.
Welcome back to Pure Athlete. I'm Jeff along with Britt, and thank God we get a week off from Brad.
I know it, no doubt. Brad is out today with another commitment. So,
yeah, we need to plan more like this so we can.
Well, we're going to see how today goes. It may be
he's on the hot seat. I tell you what, I love this time of year, man. We got the Final Four getting ready to brew. You got the Masters around the corner. Baseball's starting back up. As we do this, I'm flying out tonight. I got the Yankees and Diamondbacks, my first game, and then Braves home opener this weekend. So
yeah, there's a lot to talk about. In fact, when you come back, we'll have to dig into torpedo bats a little bit.
Oh, God,
after you're up in New York.
Well, and I need to do some more research on this. I told you my whole thing is why only the Yankees players are using this.
Right.
But so what do we got today? I'll let you talk about it.
We've got really a fun episode today. I think it's really unique. It's been 2 years since we put you on the hot seat and had you tell your story. And we want to dig into that story a little bit more today, but we want to do it from a different angle. And to do that, we've invited a special guest here, and I think it's appropriate for you to introduce him.
Well, I think I got to be a little bit vulnerable probably because he's going to bury me at times. But, I do talk a lot on here about my mom and dad, obviously, and how they were important they were for me and my career. And so right before we came on, you saw it. We were upstairs talking about a situation. And so I'll just say it, one of my heroes, mentors, my father. And so we decided, we call him El Presidente.
I love
in
that.
our family. So we are going to bring on my dad, Dave Francoeur.
Hey, thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, old man.
Yeah, thank you, Britt. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Glad to be here. Very, very much so.
Dave, we're excited to have you here because we've heard all these stories that
They're probably
Jeff tells
true.
about himself, and we want to get to the truth on some of them today. But we want to hear your perspective on, you had 3 kids, you got 10 grandkids now. Is that right?
Right.
So I think there's a lot to talk about. I have to say I'm usually the oldest in the room. And so I'm glad that you're a little older than me. I'm actually probably closer to your age than I am to Jeff's.
100%.
Yeah.
So we'll have a little bit of fun today. I have to start with a story, and this goes way back because I'm a native Atlantan. Jeff knows this. I'm a diehard Braves fan. And I 100% remember Jeff Francoeur's first game, and I was watching it on TV, and all the cameras went to you when he hit that home run. And that was the coolest moment to watch parents. Tell us about that.
But the thing that you have to remember, it was not his first at bat.
Yep.
Okay, so the first at bat, I remember it like yesterday because he struck out. No, he grounded out.
Yeah, come on, man.
Yeah, all right, he grounded out. But you struck out the next one.
Struck out my next 2. But I did put the ball in play.
It's already happening. I love it.
So it's 7th inning, okay, and we've got nothing to show for it, okay. It's and I'm looking down at Bobby Cox in the dugout saying, "Don't pull my kid. Don't pinch hit for him. Please let him get one more shot."
And it was a 1-run game, so it could have.
Tight game. And I still remember to this day, it was Glendon Rush. He was pitching for the Cubs. And he hit it to right center. And I still remember it like it was yesterday. And I looked over at my wife. I looked at my my kids, and we all looked at each other and said, "Wow, it happened."
Yeah.
And to see him flying around the bases, that was a special occasion.
Pretty cool.
Yeah,
Pretty
it
cool.
really was.
What did y'all do after the game to celebrate?
You know what's funny is I think I was living at home. I mean, I slept, and I've told the story. I'm probably one of the few that actually slept in their childhood bed. I actually think we all went back to the house.
Yeah, we did.
I did have to play the next night, and that was a long day because I had come from Montgomery, Alabama the night before, got in at 1. We had a day-night doubleheader, so I'd been at the field since 9 a.m.
Been a long day.
It had been a long day. There was a lot of happiness, but
I think it was more surreal than it was anything else. Just the fact that all your hard work had finally paid off. Here you are, and let's just enjoy the moment.
Was that the most fun home run you saw Jeff hit?
Oh gosh, Britt, I would say it probably was. Yeah, just because I realized that he'd finally made it.
Yeah,
I think that was. There were others that obviously were more important along the way, but that was the one that made you realize, hey, he finally made it there.
Absolutely.
Along with some of the strikeouts and everything else that went along there too.
We'll talk about those too.
There's plenty of those.
Low outside curveballs.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I want to jump in for a second, and before we dig into y'all's story, tell us what you're up to now. Again, I said you got 10 grandkids. Tell us what you're.
My wife and I were back and forth between Florida and in Georgia. Now we've had a condo down there at the beach for a long time. In fact, back when Jeff first signed, we got together and he got a condo down there by us. And for years we always would be back and forth there together. But with the 10 grandkids, we felt like we needed to get back up here to the Atlanta area. It's kind of hard driving 320 miles to see a grandkid play.
Yeah.
And if you see one and you don't see the other, then they know. And so I just said, hey, dear, it's time. So we purchased a house back up here in Jackson County. And so we're back and forth between here in Florida. We always check the schedule before we go.
Yeah.
Make sure we know when we're going and who's playing and who's not playing.
Yeah.
And work it that way. And so it's nice being retired, having some time.
Awesome.
But it's a little different with grandkids, Britt, than it is with your own.
Tell me about that.
Well, people would say to me, how is it watching Jeff play in front of 50,000 fans at, say, Yankee Stadium? And I'm here to say that I felt the same way when he was up there as I did when he was on the T-ball field. Mm-hmm. Because it's your own child.
Yeah, yeah.
And you hurt for your child. Yeah. I mean, you hurt more. Actually, I think you hurt more than the child themselves when he fails or she fails. So one of the things that is interesting to me, I think, as you go along, is people think if you're on a stage, it means more. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't when it's your own child. Mm-hmm. It means just as much from, like I say, the T-ball field to the major league field. You enjoy the successes, and you hurt for the failures.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where it is; it's still the same. If you're a parent.
Yeah.
And with our three, we had a lot of successes and a lot of failures along the way.
Yeah, yeah. Is it a little easier to watch as a grandparent?
Much so, yeah, much more so.
Less stress.
Because you know what I find?
Because he's like, that's his issue to work out.
I find myself looking at him and my other son and my daughter and saying, "Now it's your problem." Right. But it's always a gift to watch the grandkids play. But in my wife and I, when we sit there and look at it, we always know that we're with all three of our kids. We're with them all the way when they're coaching or trying to coach.
Yeah.
And it's just a great time. Not the pressure that you have as a parent when your kid is actually playing.
Yeah, yeah.
We were at a softball tournament a couple weeks ago, and he came, and we were down 6-3, and I'm running by to go coach third, and all I hear is, "Hey, score some runs, coach." Jeez. And I think we end up scoring 5 or 6 and taking the lead, and I run back by, and he looks and goes, "About time."
I was ready to give him his pink slip.
I love it. I love it. Jeff, your dad was and your mom were at, a lot of stuff when you were growing up. Was it important to you for them to be there?
100%. And it's part of the reason. And me and him talked numerous times. Obviously, my wife Katie and me a lot more, but him and my mom, very instrumental. And when I decided to step back from doing 110 Braves games, because, he worked in DeKalb County school system. So he got out at 5:00. And I mean, I knew a lot of times he would come straight to the park for my games, my sister games, my brother games at 5:30. My mom would have us all ready and drop us off. But you remember that. You remember when they're there because of what I think he just said is, your kids are going to go through disappointments, man. And like, who do you look for the first time? You look for your mom or your dad for guidance. And so I think, for me, it was a big part of why I did what I did. Cause I know that not just me who made it in the big leagues, but walking through it with my brother and my sister, who are both very successful now. They didn't play in the big leagues. They didn't play at the highest level, but because they were there, for majority of their stuff.
I want to dig into that a little bit. So to start, tell us, you've got an older brother and older sister. Your brother's the oldest. Everybody was into sports, right? Tell us what the Francoeur household was like with everybody growing up.
Well, we needed to rent a parent because we had 3 playing ball and there was only 2 of us. Yeah. So, but one thing we did along the way, Britt, we got into coaching every other year, so we did not want to coach them all the way through. We felt like it was important to be have an opportunity to coach our kids as we went along, but let the kids also have an opportunity to work under somebody else. So we never were in a situation where we coached every one of our 3 every year. We kind of rotated around. So with that being said, the one that we were actually coaching that particular season, whatever it was, that's kind of where we had all hands on deck there. And then whatever time we had left over, we split between the other 2, and we used that as a rotating basis. So I think it was good to be subjected to other styles. We thought that was important. But yet, on the other hand, it still kept we're able to keep tabs on what was happening with all 3 by doing it that way. And we just kind of rotated around. And, I always felt like if we brought these kids into the world, we really felt like we had an obligation to give them every opportunity that they wanted. I never had to force them to play a sport, all 3 of them. Never did that. Never wanted to force them to play a sport that they didn't want to. Now, once they signed up for that sport, they were going to finish the season. And if they never wanted to touch a racket, a ball, whatever again, no problem. But you're going to finish that season. And so we rotated it around that way and playing different sports. We never zeroed in on one particular sport. We had them playing everything. And really, it was whatever was in season. And that's kind of how we operated. So a lot of meals on the fly, a lot of takeout.
So I think a lot of parents can relate to that. So let me ask you this. Obviously family was big for you guys, because Jeff is, he's all about family, and I'm sure he got that from how he grew up. Did you guys have any non-negotiables as a family? You're doing all the sports thing year round. What were the priorities for you as parents?
There were 2 non-negotiable weeks out of the year. One was a summer vacation for a week, and trying to get all 3 of them, plus my wife and I together, the 5 of us to go, but that was going to happen. And then right after Christmas, we would go and spend New Year's. That was a week's vacation.
Down in Hilton Head.
A lot of times to Hilton Head. But it was always, those were locked in stone. So whenever we decided that these were going to be the times in the summer, because the winter was pretty locked in, but the summer was tough. One's playing this sport, one's playing that sport, one's playing this, that. We're going this week. Yeah. And if we miss something, then hey, we missed it, but we're going. Yeah. And those were 2 of the weeks out of the year. And the other side of it was whenever one of the kids was home and not playing, we took them to watch their brother or sister play. I thought that was important. I never wanted to disconnect. I wanted them to be always connected with the 3 of them together.
I love that.
In what they were doing and sharing their success and sharing their failure. Yeah. And I think sometimes today there's not enough sharing in the failure. Everybody loves the success, but what about the failure? And that's part of growing up. There's a story on that. I think when my wife and I were coaching our daughter softball. I think she was about 10 at the time, and I did a great job. We ended up 3 wins and 12 losses that year. I was really did a great job. If there was a pink slip to be given, I probably would have got it. But I remember when after the game, the last game ended, we said, thank goodness. But the team mom says to me, "Now, when do we get our trophies?" And I sat there and I said, "Trophies? For what? We were 3 wins and 12 losses. We didn't win anything." And she said, "Well, everybody's got to have a trophy." And it almost was like getting hit over the head with a 2x4 that I realized, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Everybody winning is almost more important than reality.
Yeah.
And I just said, no, let's just get a participation medal or something to that effect. Because I felt like at that point in time, we have to learn to win, but we got to also learn how to lose, and everybody doesn't win.
Yeah. No, we need to talk about that more. That reminds me, I had a story when my boys were playing basketball and I was coaching. They won the championship game and they got their trophies, and we found out that the team that lost, they were in another room and they were getting bigger trophies than my team got.
That won the championship.
Yeah, that's crazy. But yeah, we could spend a whole episode talking about that. So I'm curious, I know DJ and Heather were good athletes as well. At some point in time, and Jeff was the youngest, at some point in time, you had to know Jeff is got something kind of special here. What did that look like, and how it would be easy as a parent to go all in, on the athletic ability of the youngest. And obviously whatever y'all did worked. But how do you stay balanced and, you're giving as much attention to your other 2 kids as you are to the one who's maybe the best athlete?
His first words were ball. Well, his first word was ball. Mm-hmm. Not mom, not dad, ball. And I think when he was 2, 3, 4 years old, he'd be laying down in front of the TV on a Saturday morning watching the cartoons, and he'd have a ball in his hand, flipping his ball in his hand. Now, my other 2 never did that, and I don't know how many 3 or 4 year olds sit in front of a TV and throw a ball up there and catch it, but that's what he did. And there's an interesting story. When we started to play T-ball, I said, "You really want to do it?" And he wanted to play. I want to play, and so okay. And I remember the Yankees. Remember that game?
Oh, I remember.
What age was this?
5.
I was 5.
Okay.
And as you all of you remember with the T-ball, after a couple swings, you put the ball on the tee, and then if you miss it, then you hit it. And so the whole key there is you hit it and put it in play, and everybody gets a trophy kind of thing. And I had told him that you're not hitting off the tee. This was his second year of T-ball. If you're not hitting off the tee, I said, I'm going to throw you 3 pitches, and then instead of taking the other 2 and putting it on a tee to give you 2 swings, which is your 5 swings total, I said, you're going to get 5 pitches. And if you miss, you're done. You struck out. I don't think he thought I would do it. And I think we were, what was it, a tie game or whatever? We were behind by a run or something, and he came up with the bases loaded. And I proceeded to throw him 3, and he missed all 3.
Bad pitching.
Bad swings. Curveball blown away.
Started early.
So the last 2, he said, I could see he was looking over at the tee. I said, nah, get back in the box. And I struck him out.
I'm pretty sure he might have done it on purpose. I'm not going to lie to you.
And the parents, the fans, everybody looking at me like I'm the bad guy.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't let my kid hit off a tee, to win the game. And I said, no, to me it was more important at that time to try to hit a live pitch. Mm-hmm. And I figured, if he really was into it like he felt like he was, like he said he was, and he showed that he was, it'll hurt. And the only way to get better, to me, is if it hurts, you're going to dig in a little deeper. Mm-hmm. And he did. And we still talk about that today. This is what, 35 years ago.
God, yeah.
We still talk about it like it was yesterday.
You remember him striking you out.
Oh, I cried. I went to the dugout and cried, 100%.
And I was at my wife. My wife was mad at me. Why didn't you let him hit off the tee?
And I remember him saying, he'll learn next time you'll hit it.
Yeah, and that's what I did.
But, yeah, for sure.
I love it. You like just sitting here and being quiet?
Oh, yeah. Well, the one thing I always say, my mom and dad, and I've told you this, like I see a lot of families these days, if there's 3 or 4 kids, if there's one that kind of excels above the other, they kind of focus in on that kid.
Yeah.
And I know plenty of kids that I played with in the big leagues whose relationships with their brother or sister or the parents with them is not phenomenal because of that. And I always said they did such a good job of, like, there were plenty of times where I had maybe a big travel baseball tournament or whatever, and my dad would go with my brother to a golf tournament somewhere for the weekend. And it was like, your mom's with your sister at basketball, and maybe a grandparent could be there or not, but it was like, hey, you got to go play. If you love this game, go play it. You can't have someone there every single time. But I always said they did such a good job of treating my brother, my sister, and me the exact same when it came to it. My sister played Division III basketball, and, my games in the big league were just as important as hers in front of 60 people. And so they left such a good example for us with that.
I love that.
I think one of the things, Britt, that as a grandparent today that makes me the happiest when I watch him or my daughter or my other son, three of them, when they're out there working with their kid, I reflect back to how it was when I worked with them. It's not so much how things are going with the grandkid. It's how are things still going with my son or my daughter? Are they still doing the same things that we tried to instill in them years ago? And my wife and I will always get together after a game, for example, and talk about that more than we did whether they won or lost.
Yeah.
How did they handle the situation? Are they giving the kids a chance to play in different positions? Are they giving all the kids a chance to bat? Are they doing all those things that at that age are so important, nurturing the kid so that they can get an experience in different positions? So many times I would see that a coach at 5, 6, 7 years of age trying to win. The only thing about it is winning. And I sit there and I say, whoa, what are we teaching here? Give the kid a chance to succeed, because that kid who's 5 or 6 years old, if he's not getting an opportunity, he may forget that sport and say, you know what, I'm over it. And if they really want to play it, as I said earlier, I think as a parent, you have an obligation to give them every opportunity to do that. I know when Jeff came along with our other two, rec ball was still a real good quality. And it's still a very good thing today if that's what the child wants. But if the kid wants to go that extra mile, not the parent, but the kid, if he wants to try to experience that, I think as a parent, you have a right to and an obligation to give them every opportunity to do that. Jeff would oftentimes ask, Dad, can we go to the batting cage and hit? And if I'm sitting there and I'm not doing that, then I don't think I'm fulfilling my role as a parent. My daughter, Heather, out there shooting 150 free throws. Dad, come on out and watch what I'm doing. My oldest son, DJ, Dad, let's go to the golf course. Can you drop me? I want to go ahead and play. It was just a rotating thing, I think, as Jeff mentioned, but it's fun now because I get to see the three of them do that with their kids. And nothing makes me prouder as a grandparent than to see them doing that with their kids. My wife and I, that means more to us than whether the kid ever won or lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Did all three of your kids who all played a college sport, did they all, drive themselves growing up, or were there any times when you had to push?
The only time I really felt like I had to push is if they signed up to play. We signed up to play a sport. You're going to finish that season. So if you didn't have a lot of success with it or whatever, and I don't want to go to practice, you're going to do that. You're going to practice. You're going to play the game, and at the end of the season, if you don't want to do it anymore, you don't have to. But back to what you were saying with that, we gave them the opportunity, and then we wanted them to take it from there. I didn't want to be a dad. My wife didn't want to be a mother who was just pushing, saying to the kid, this is what you've got to do. I feel like today there's a lot of that's out there. And you never know what sport a child wants to play. I know Jeff and I have had several conversations this year with his son, our grandson Braden, playing lacrosse. I've had several say to me, geez, Dave, what does Jeff think because his son's not playing baseball? I say, nothing. Well, what do you mean, nothing? I said, he's having a ball playing lacrosse, and he's doing very well, and he's getting much better at it. Yeah. I'm seeing the progression there. He didn't know anything about lacrosse. I didn't know anything about lacrosse. We've learned, and go for it. But when you start pushing the kid to say, play baseball or play this sport or that sport, and that's not where the child's heart is, I think you're doing a disservice to the child. Yeah. So with all three of mine, back to your point, there has never been a situation where I had to push one of our three to play the particular sport that they ended up playing. My daughter played softball. She played basketball. My oldest son, he played basketball. He played baseball. He golfed. Jeff played basketball. He played football and of course, baseball. But they were involved in all those different sports. But when the season came, if they were into wanting to practice with it, let's go. And that's what we did. So I never really pushed any of them into any of the three sports. They chose the sport themselves, and then I just followed with it.
Jeff, as you look back, what do you appreciate most about the way your parents did it?
Well, I would say probably the tough life lessons that you look at. You know, one thing I think my dad did such a good job at, and my mom too, is, you know, we were the kids, and at the end of the day, that's exactly what we were. We're kids. And I think these days, when we talk about it, like with coaching, when the kids are especially younger, like my dad, I remember in T-ball, when he's talking about moving guys around, I would play circle, the first inning or two. And I remember he would be like, go to the outfield in the third inning. And I'd be like, why? And he'd say, beat it, get out there, you know? But now I appreciate it. It's like, you're not going to let a 5 and 6-year-old tell you where he's going to play. Was I the best at the circle? Probably. But it's like, we're going to let other kids play too. And so I think those are the lessons. I remember, gosh, still in basketball, I remember when Mom went to that game, there was a playoff game, and we lost by 3 or 4 points, and my dad was with my sister.
I know where
and I was probably 10 years old, and we were not a great team. I scored a lot of points that game, and we lost by like 3 or 4. My mom was there, and I told the ref he sucked as I walked off the court. And I think I've told this story on it before.
Yeah,
but
I was just about to ask about this story.
and I told the ref he sucked. And my mom gets in the car. She heard it, the whole thing. And Mom would, Dad was a disciplinary. Mom would get on you. But I remember she got in the car and just undressed me, how disappointed she was. So I thought it was over. So about 45 minutes later, my dad pulls up from my sister or brother's game, wherever he was at. And she told him, and he said, get in the car. And so we drove back to Trickle Middle School. I remember that's for the playoff game. And I had to sit there and wait. It was like the other game was in the third quarter. And after the quarter ended, he made me walk across the court in front of all these people and go up and apologize to the ref. And man, I was so embarrassed. We had a spend the night party that night. I couldn't go to that and do it. But like now as a parent, I love it because that's a lesson that I teach my kids. It's like, do not talk to the refs. You play the game, let the coaches or whoever it is worry about it. But, you know, it was just those, and it was embarrassing to have to sit there and do it and know what you did, tell the ref. And I still thought he sucked. I mean, it's not like, you know, I'm going over there telling this guy, but at the same time, I realized like, hey, I'm 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I might not know what's best for me. And then we got in the car and we drove home, and that was that. But it was a great lesson that I learned at a young age. And so I think those are the things for me. When you talk about the non-negotiables, and I talked about this the other day, you know, at our house, it was God first, family second, school third, and sports fourth. And they did a great job of never wavering, no matter how big the game was, no matter how high the stakes were. If we didn't take care of the other three, we weren't going to play in the game.
Well, and that gives you a blueprint for your own family.
100%. Absolutely. And tell my kids, like, you don't take care of this, you're not going to get to do what you really want to do. Because they knew that. I mean, that was the whole thing. Even like, you know, I didn't have phones, anything, but my mom and dad knew for me, if I got in trouble, they would just take away games. And that was the only way. I missed a few games. Be honest with you.
Yeah.
Which it's so funny because that's unheard of today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I missed plenty of games. I missed a half of a JV football game. I had to sit on the thing, and I remember my dad going up telling the coach, Jeff ain't playing the first half. And they're like, no, we'll make him run. And my dad, I remember saying, no, that ain't going to do nothing. He'll run 6 miles.
Yeah.
But if he has to sit on that sideline the first half and watch his teammates, that'll kill him.
See, I love that, Dave, because you probably realize this now. You probably didn't in the midst, because I'm on the back end of it too. And you realize during those times, you're teaching your kids to be parents one day. And all these things that you're instilling and doing now came from from what you saw your parents do. And so I think it's a good message to our parents who are listening, that they're not only trying to shepherd their kids through sports and teach them life lessons, but you're modeling and teaching your kids, how to parent one day.
Well, we make decisions. Some we make that are good, some that aren't so good. But I can't imagine today the pressure on a parent with social media. That to me is something that my wife and I never had to deal with. Now, I still, as I mentioned to you earlier, the core values to me are still there. I don't care whether it's social media or not; those core values are still there. If he had still told that referee the same thing, he'd still be going back up there today. I don't care. He wouldn't be sending a text or an email.
31 years later, he still sucks. I'll tell you that. It's a bad call.
I'd still be taking him up there, sitting him on the bench, and then putting him out there in front of all those fans to go and apologize to the official, because that's what he did to the official. He showed up that official when he said that to him.
Yeah.
So guess what? Turnabout is fair play. Yeah. So today I would have still done the same thing. I would not have had him send a text or this or that or the other. So, but those lessons in life to me are still entrenched in parenting. I think what they have to be, you have to have your core values, as Jeff just mentioned. And it hurts. As a parent, it hurts. That's the thing, that you don't want to punish them because it hurts. You don't want to see that taken away, but they're not a buddy. You're a parent.
Yeah.
And sometimes I see what I think is a situation where oftentimes parents are trying to be the friend to the child instead of being the parent. And so some of the things that we still laugh about today are the things that hurt the most back when that happened. It hurt for me to take him back up in that car in front of everybody else, because you know what? Not only did it hurt for him, it hurt for me.
Sure.
I was embarrassed.
Sure.
Look what my kid did. But my whole take on it is, if I did not take him back up there that day and do that, what would other parents think of me? Or what would I think of myself, more importantly? It wasn't going to happen that way. So that's why we did what we did. We still talk about it today. But nothing makes me happier than to see the three of mine out there parenting their kids some of the same ways that my wife and I did with them.
Well, we talk a lot on this show about character and the importance of building character within your kids, and I was going to ask you about, how did you instill humility? I know Katie says that you were a little cocky for her at first.
There's no doubt.
But as a young kid and a boy, being great in sports is the pinnacle, and you get a lot of accolades. How did you keep his feet grounded and to be somebody? And you just told one story, and that did instill respect. It's about other people, not just about you.
Well, I think you have to be, you have to have humble. You got to be humble. But there is a story that made me feel pretty good as a parent. Jeff was in Mississippi. He had been called up and was with the Mississippi Braves AA team, and they were in Jackson, Mississippi, and he had gone through a rough stretch. And the night before, I guess he had 4 or 5 games where he was having difficulty. Anyway, the night before, I think he struck out 3 times and popped out. And I talked to him after the game, and he was just down. And that's when I said to my wife, I said, you know what? I'm driving over there tomorrow to Mississippi. Told my boss, I'm sorry, this is a parent thing that I've just got to do. And off I went. Didn't tell him I was coming. And purposely got there about an hour before the game and parked myself up in the grandstand up there where he wouldn't see me. And I saw him down there signing autographs for a bunch of the kids. And if you ask me what I remember most about that season, even what he did to get called up to the Braves, it wasn't that. It was he was down there signing autographs after having been 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts and 0 for the week, really. And I called my wife. I called her from the outfield, and I said, we're okay.
He's okay. Yeah.
We're okay. Yeah. She said, well, why are we okay? I said, he hadn't hit the ball. Why are we okay? He hadn't hit the ball in 3 days. I said, because he's doing what we would want him to do. He's giving back and signing those autographs. And I remember then he took the field, and I hollered out a couple things to him when he was out there, and he looked up in the stands.
He said, Francoeur, you suck. Yeah. I remember it.
Oh, well, I wouldn't know.
I didn't know he was out. But I heard the voice, I heard that, and I just turned around and gave him one of these.
After the game, we had a hamburger and a couple of beers, went and shot some pool.
Yeah.
And but it was a bonding time again between the two of us. But I told him then how proud I was of him for what he had gone through. And then, it took over from there. Did the same thing when he was up in Philadelphia. I remember one time we were in Philadelphia. We did the same thing. And that kind of thing means more, I think, as a parent to your child than anything that they can do on a ball field, because that's life. That's a life lesson. And if you don't have those life lessons, I see today so many, you talk about being humble. I see today so many kids try to emulate a major leaguer or someone else who doing a dance or doing this or that. I always say, act like you've been there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And don't do that. I remember back in high school, Coach Buchanan. You remember that one, Jeff? Jeff had just gotten called up, ninth grade.
Ninth grade.
And playing Brookwood. I remember that like it was yesterday. And I'm sitting there, and Jeff hit a home run. And he started pimping himself out of the dugout. Out of the batter's box. And I said, uh-oh, this doesn't look good. And sure enough, as he rounded third, he came back in there, and Coach Buchanan. I love Coach for that. He lit him up. Because he said in the real world, the next batter up is going to get a fastball right by his noggin.
Right.
And what he make you do
me
after the game?
Coach Doug Jones, who was at Parkview before, he made me apologize to him.
There you go.
And when we walked through the line.
And
he told me as a freshman, if I did it again, I'd be down playing with the freshman team.
And so, again, that's the same type of I appreciated that.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of respect for Coach Buchanan. I see a lot of the same principles that he had and has that I have.
That's great. That's great. I'm going to ask you to tell another story where you made a drive, and my parents both passed last year, but they would always tell me, Britt, parenting never ends. You're always a parent. Now the role changes a little bit, so on and so forth. But Jeff was in Myrtle Beach, got hit in the face by baseball, and tell the beginning of that story, and then I want to hear your reaction to all that.
Well, I was getting called up the next day to Double-A, and I was hitting 299 my last at bat. I turned to square, and I got hit with 96, 97 right in the face, and just knocked me out cold. I was out for 5-10 seconds, came to blood everywhere, and I called. So once I got in the ambulance, they called your work phone, right? And it was your secretary, who I knew forever, and she said he's in a meeting, and I think the guy said to her, he needs to take this. If I'm right?
Yep, that's correct. You're right on. And then when I got it and found out what had happened, then one of the traveling secretary, somebody
for
the Braves, said, Mr. Francoeur, we have a ticket booked for you. Get to the airport and get up here as soon as you can. Which I thought, and I still to this day, if they said there was one thing that the Atlanta Braves organization did right, and they did 100 things over the time, it was great. That's the one I remember more than anything, because I was a parent there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not a spectator watcher. I'm a parent.
Yeah.
And my kid has just gotten hit with a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. The last thing I'm thinking about is anything about Major League Baseball or minor league baseball. How's my child doing?
Right.
So I remember jumping on that plane and getting up there and seeing him. And I walked into the hospital and I said, oh my gosh. He had
it was rough.
He had a welt up there.
Yeah.
We couldn't fly back for a couple of days because the doctor wanted to get the pressure down
Mm-hmm.
so that we could fly back. But that is a story again, and I commend the Braves. They were first class operation that they ran, and allowed me as a parent to be there. It meant more to me than anything that could happen, that they cared enough for me to get up there.
That's awesome.
So that was a special moment that we shared too, and to this day we still talk about that.
Yeah.
What would that mean to you?
Well, like anything, that's the two people you call right away were mom and dad, and it was so funny because my mom was there for everything too, but like I would call, even in the big leagues, I would call him every night after a game, and sometimes we talk about my AB, sometimes we talk about something else. But every once in a while, it's so funny because my mom would get on sometimes and she'd be like, you don't look like yourself. And I'm like, just give me to dad. And she wanted to talk about anything else. But when my mom would start talking hitting, and she'd be like, I've watched you since you were 6, and I'm like, let dad tell me I suck. I don't want to hear from you, But at that moment, like I needed him as a dad, not anything else. I was hurting. I was crying when I talked to him. I think he was crying when he heard my voice. And it was just one of those things that you had to overcome, right? And then there was, people talk about just those 2-3 weeks. There was a lot of moments that were tough the next 10 weeks when I was trying to get back into play from a mental standpoint, man. I was scared to death. And, what was so great with him, it wasn't like, get back in there, stop being a wuss, blah, blah. Like he worked through it with me because, the pain that I felt that day was the worst pain I've ever felt. And every ball I remember, I thought was just going to get, but then he helped me kind of push like, hey, even if because remember there's 2.5 weeks left of the season left, and I was going to the Arizona Fall League and we were talking about it. It would have been real easy to kind of say, hey, let's just take it off. But he's like, look, even if you don't get a hit in the next 2.5 weeks, just get in the box and try to get comfortable again. And we did it. And I ended up having a great Arizona Fall League, which set me up for the next year. But it took a lot to work through that. And that was cool. There wasn't a pushiness of like, hey, why are you stepping out?
I don't think, as Jeff's saying, as a parent, I wasn't as concerned with him, whether he made it to the big leagues or not. I was more concerned with getting over that fear of getting back in the batter's box. And so you say, hey, here's a guy who's, AA, AAA, and it's no different than that 6 or 7-year-old who's back there facing a kid pitching, and now the coach ain't pitching anymore, throwing that ball over the plate. Now all of a sudden I got a kid throwing, and that thing might be coming at my head. And we all know that. We've all been there. The foot, he's stepping in the bucket and everything else, just try to get out of the way. Felt no different. I felt like at that time, Jeff, you got to get back in there. If nothing else, just see that pitch coming in and realize that, you can handle it. Whether you go 0 for the next 2 weeks or whatever, it didn't matter. Just get over that hump yourself.
Right.
And because I can't help you do it, the coach can't help you do it. You got to get over that hump yourself. Right. And as Jeff said, he had a great fall league. But for those 2.5 weeks, I'm glad that he did what he did because it helped get over that fear.
We talk a lot about coaches that maybe you don't like or you don't agree with or you're being mistreated. And so I got to ask you, because one of my great life lessons now is when I was 12, I was probably the second best player on our travel team. And I was hitting 10th out of 11 guys.
Daddy ball.
Daddy ball, yes. But we played for 3 or 4 months on that team, before you finally pulled me from it. And we went and had fun the rest of the summer and played golf and did whatever. But, I'm curious and for other parents to know, because you hear a lot today now to me, no different in college with NIL. You don't like it, pick your stuff up and go somewhere else. Kids don't battle through adversity anymore. So what was you and Mom's whole reasoning making me continue to play for that team and have to fight through it?
Well, first of all, I guess what happened is the season started with 2 or 3 coaches in the dugout. Then it became 4 or 5 coaches in the dugout. Then it became 6 and 7 coaches in the dugout. And finally, at the end of the day, I think there were more coaches in the dugout than there were players. and it was me and one other fellow that were. And again, as I said earlier, I just felt like it was good to have him subjected to other situations. But that had grown to a situation where I said, "Ooh, boy, this is." And everybody was in it for their kid, and but we went with it and stayed with it, and then finally during a tournament during the summer, we just decided, that was it wasn't having any fun with it. We had met our obligation, and I just finally said, you know what, Jeff, let's go. We loaded up. And he and I headed down to St. Simon's.
We were in Savannah.
St. Simon's, and we played 2 or 3 days of golf and had some good father-son time together. And I think those bonding experiences throughout life are still things that we talk about today. Here we are 35, 40 years later, still talking about them as if they happened yesterday. But I think as a parent, again, those are the life lessons that you're trying to teach your child. So it would have been very easy just to say, forget it. But hey, let's go through some adversity. You're going to learn from it, make you a better person, make you a better coach down the road. And I love that. What I see now is that Jeff's got the kids out there playing different positions as a coach.
Yeah.
Not just stuck in one position, this or the other. And it makes me feel good when I see that.
I love, too, that what you saw with your dad is, he was teaching you these life lessons, but he also had your back.
100%. And I knew he had my back, and he said it. You don't deserve to be hitting 10th, but this is what we're doing right now and keep going. And then eventually, like he said, it got to a point that it was just ridiculous. And at that point, we'd played 3-4 months and And he was like, you know what? Let's go.
We met our obligation.
We did.
As I said, we wanted to finish what we started, and we did, and it was time just to.
And then the best thing we ever did was the next 2 years, I played with all my buddies that I played with in high school. And I've said this story. We were competitive, but we would go to these tournaments and get whipped some, but we were playing the best competition. Yeah. But again, I was playing with my buddies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't put a price tag on that. And I always said, I love that because it could have been very easy for him at 13 or 14 to me say, no, we're going to play at East Cobb. We're playing on the top team, because I could have. It wouldn't have been an issue. But he knew I didn't want to do that. And he honored that as long as I kept working and getting better. And I think that was the cool thing, that I always respect is that, I think a lot of kids today, if they're the top 1 or 2 kids in the state, they're going to play in all these different things. And he let me just kind of ride my own journey.
One of the things, Britt, that I can remember well was when he was in 11th grade, and he won a football state champion, won baseball, same thing. And then we started getting a lot of feedback from some of the professional scouts. And every one of them said to me, well, you're not going to let him play football next year as a senior, are you? I said, well, yes. Well, why would you chance him getting an injury as a senior in football just before the baseball signing period where he would be a Major League Baseball player? I said, because he's a high school senior. And I had no second thoughts at all about him not playing football. Yeah. Because my take on that was if the good Lord decides that this is going to end his career, then that's what it's going to be. Mm-hmm. But the friendships that he had in high school, and I've listened to your podcast before where, you build those relationships, and sometimes you take those for granted until you don't have them anymore. And to see him still interact with all his high school buddies, to me, tells me that my wife and I made the right decisions along the way to give him the opportunity to interact with those guys. And that's what being a high school, kid is all about. That was one of the most difficult things we had to do when it came time for signing, when he signed with the Braves. And, of course, we had no NIL or any of that at this time. Yeah. So if you at all talked with a representative, or what they called it at that time, back representative,
which is crazy.
You just couldn't talk with him because if it was found that you were engaging,
you were ineligible to play in college.
You were ineligible to play in college.
Yeah.
So this is when he had the Clemson football, baseball thing in his hip pocket. Yeah. And I'm sitting there as a parent saying, there's no way I'm going to jeopardize this, because if this baseball thing doesn't work, I want to be driving up I-85.
Yeah.
And but I remember, boy, you better not be caught, talking to an agent.
Which
because
now
if you have an agent,
like,
now the whole thing
Wild West.
Kids are represented in 9th grade. Like, so-and-so is represented. I'm like, really?
So it was very clear that if you were caught with the NCAA talking to, an agent, then you were then considered a pro, and you were no longer then able to participate in collegiate sports. So we still tell that story to this day. We go back on that, and I say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't right. The way they do it today with the NIL, it's just a whole different ballgame.
It is a whole different ballgame in so many ways. But talking about the football, baseball thing, I mean, we've talked to so many people, and I love when we say this over and over and over again, because parents need to hear it. So many people that played pro ball that say their high school sports are their best memories. Greg Maddox, World Series champion, said winning a state championship, my high school baseball team is my best memory.
Oh, I still tell the story. 2 years ago, we went my dad, he's talking about all my best friends from high school. We went to Mexico for 5 days and sat in the pool. The wives just laughed because we sat there and told football story over and over that we have told 1,000 times, embellished now, no doubt, that we did this. But like, that's what I always say, that my wife will tell you, and I think she might even said on the thing, the best thing my mom and dad did for me was they gave me the most normal high school experience I could ask for. And, the only thing we did that was different was going into my senior year. I went to Cuba for 4 weeks for baseball, but that was kind of that all-in moment. We knew this was my chance to do it. But I even say we came home, and remember we had 2 showcases still available when I came home, but it was the start of 2-a-days. And I remember my dad saying, you've done enough. Go play football with your buddies now. We'll pick the baseball bats up. And a lot of people don't believe this, but he can tell you now, when I played football, we did not throw or hit baseballs in October, November. We never touched a bat.
In fact, his first varsity sport was basketball. A lot of people don't realize that. It was the first one.
Till I missed a 3 in the corner and the coach yanked me after. I got in, dude. I jacked it up versus Norcross High School as a freshman, airballed it, and he was like, all right, Jeff, you're out.
It's still going.
Well, wrapping up here, couple more things. And one, Jeff has mentioned this. I don't know if you've mentioned this on the show, but you've mentioned this to me at the end of every Major League Baseball game. Jeff called you on his way home. He tells us that's got to make you as a dad, I mean, that's what it's kind of all about. And you're sitting here today and y'all have a great relationship. Ball is over. You're coaching your kids and y'all have a great relationship. So is that not reward enough?
Family is like Jeff said, God family. and if you don't have that, I think you're missing a lot today. Even today, when he's out there on the mound with the little 5-year-olds, and one of them will hit, or his son will hit it. Cam hits it. He looks over at me, and I see the wink or the thumbs up. We don't have to say anything. We know, he knows, I know. Good hit, and we know too that he's thinking back to what happened when he was a 5-year-old. Yeah. I know darn well that's in the back of his mind because it's in the back of my mind. 35 years ago.
I was ready to strike Camden out last week. He didn't hit 4, and it's rookie ball, so you get a hit until you hit off the tee. But I remember thinking, like, I might just keep throwing to him until he just, and after 2 more, tell him to sit down.
But it's that little innuendo that happens between, say, a father and a son. And I have that with my daughter, I have it with my other son too. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying about the family, situation. And so that to me, and for my wife, that gives us more satisfaction than anything that could happen. Yeah. I remember one time, Britt, he was, we were playing at Turner Field, back in Turner Field, and in sellout, and he had stunk it up, 2 or 3 strikeouts or whatever, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden someone behind us hollers, "Francoeur, you're a bum." And I remember my wife turning around to me, she says, "Well, do something." I said, "What do you want me to do? He stinks. He stunk it up." 2 or 3 strikeouts.
He's like, I'm about to join with him.
And I said, "You got to understand, dear, that they bought a ticket and they have a right to holler out whatever they want."
Yeah, that's hard to hear.
And I said, "It's tough, isn't it?" Yeah. And she would sit there and say, "Geez, this is tough." Yeah. And so again, you hit a home run as Jeff would hit, or get a big hit, and he's a hero. Everybody loves you. And then 2 at-bats later, you're a bum. Yeah. That's the way Major League Baseball or any sport goes. Yeah. You're only as good as your last at-bat is what I used to always say. But as a parent, that hurt. That hurt to hear you're a bum. And then when you hit a home run and you're a great guy, boy, you just love it. And you have to realize this is life. Yeah. You got to enjoy the successes, but you've also got to learn how to deal with the failures. And I think as a parent, one of the things that both my wife and I have tried to do, sometimes we did it better than others, but instill in them, enjoy your successes, but how do you deal with your failures? And if you don't fail, I don't think that's real life today. Life is not all about successes. It's about how you deal with your failures.
I think the one thing that him and my mom did a great job was preparing me for the spotlight and for when the chips got heavier. And I always say this in New York, man, I go up there now and I have great relationships with all the media people up there. But the reason I was always accessible after games, David Wright, same way when I played with him, I loved it, was he always taught me, it's easy when you're going well to be this guy and to be this, but when things are going crappy, that's when you find out truly what type of person and player you are. And I always said that, even through the tough times, man, as many times I want to leave that locker room before talking to the media, I would think of him and my mom. And I would think, what would they say right now? And I'd sit there and I'd answer the questions and I'd take the blame. And so I think, like he said, when she was sitting there doing it, and I sit there and watch my kids now, and there's days they stink, but it's like, it's a process and you got to stay in the fight. And they did such a good job. I'll let Britt finish with a question. But my last question for you, Dad, would be, what's your advice to parents today trying to navigate this? And I think including what you said, and that was a big key, is with social media today kind of on top of, what's your advice to the parents?
To a parent today, I would have to say that I can't really help you with social media.
No, we
because
know
you're
that.
so changed.
You got a flip phone. For God's sake.
So you're
couldn't
talking
get it if
to the
you
wrong
tried.
one. But as I said earlier, to me, whether it's social media or not, family values or your parental values, they don't change. And you can throw all that media out. If you don't have that set of core values as a parent or parents, then I think you're not going to be able to instill in your child as they grow up what they really need to be successful. And part of that is to enjoy your successes, but also let them fail. If you're always there to pick them up when they're failing, then they never really realize in life that life is not fair. And a lot of things happen in life where it's not fair. And how are you prepared to handle those? So to me, it's the hardest thing as a parent because you feel for your child. And that's when I said earlier, whether you're in front of 50,000 fans or 5 fans, you hurt just as much when your child fails. But you got to let them fail. It's how they react to that failure that, to me as a parent, then sets it in motion. I struck out 3 times, Dad. I want to get better. Let's go hit. Well, you know what? Let's go hit. And if it's the time that it involved making that happen, then as a parent, you need to do that. That's your responsibility. So I guess what I say overall, I think as I look at the whole situation today, watching him and my other 2 coach their own kids, give everybody an opportunity. Don't just try to win and lose based on what you want. Give everybody the opportunity. But more importantly, as a parent, instill in the kids the values that you have. And that comes first before any of the other wins and losses and everything else. And I think if you try to do that, hopefully it will work along the way. Those things that my wife and I tried to instill in Jeff, those are still the things that we joke about today. You know, we joke about them, but
You want to joke then. It's a joke now.
it hurt then. Yeah. And it hurt as a parent.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm not in the social media business. I can only respect what parents have to deal with today with social media. But those core values, to me, are the most important things. If you don't have a set of core values as a parent or parents, I don't think you'll be able to instill what you want in your child.
Well, I think that's a great place to end because that's great stuff. That was going to be my last question as well. So I just want to say, first of all, well done. You know, you've obviously done a great job with 2 of your kids. Jeff's still a work in process.
Well, we were going to have 4, but after we had Jeff, we stopped at 3.
That's it. In all seriousness, you know,
He ain't lying on that, though. You think that's funny?
he speaks so highly of both of you guys, and we see, you know, the fruits of your labor and stressing those values in his life, and as he's sharing with other people, you know, on this podcast. So thanks so much
thank
for,
you, Britt.
for
Thanks
being
for
a great
having
role
me.
model
Appreciate
for
it.
him, and
Thank
thanks
you,
for being
Jeff.
here.
Yeah. Thanks to the El Presidente for coming on. Love you, man.